Thanks for joining us again on Welcome to America, an immigration story and part two of Maria's story. If you missed part one, you want to go to our channel and watch it first so that you can get the most out of this segment. While you're there, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on some really great stories and information. Who knows? You might discover the solution to your own immigration problem, and we might be saying to you, Welcome to America. Okay, first a quick recap on the first part of Maria's story. So Maria lived in Guatemala with her husband, who's a U.S. citizen. Her husband became abusive, so Maria fled to America with her youngest child. This older child had cerebral palsy, and she left her behind with her grandmother. She had just crossed the border and was put on a bus, heading to New York, where she hoped to connect with her aunt, who lived in New Jersey. Now, to continue on with Maria's story, I'm going to bring back Andres Meher, New Jersey immigration attorney and immigration advocate, to talk about the problems and challenges Maria will face when she arrives in New York.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to talking to you about Maria's story.
So, Andres, I know everyone who watched the first part of Maria's story is anxious to find out what happens to Maria and Mario next. But first, is this a common story? An immigrant woman fleeing her abusive husband, and how's her story, different from others?
So, look, that's a great question. It is today a very common story. We're having huge numbers of immigrants presenting themselves at the border, a lot of them asking for asylum legally. Maria's story is not unique. Now, in some situations, maybe Maria is running away from an abusive spouse who's part of a cartel, or maybe her spouse was killed, or maybe her parents or herself were threatened by a cartel. So this one's a little different in that, one, her husband is a U.S. citizen. So that's not as common when you're outside the United States and you're married to a U.S. citizen. But although it sounds like it's uncommon, there are hundreds of cases that we've had like that. But it's not so unusual when you think of parents might have been here, had a child, and then went back to their home country with a child that maybe was 2-3 years old. Now is 21, 22, 25, and is a U.S. citizen, maybe never been in his or her life in the U.S. since that 2-year-old. So in that sense, we have seen quite a few of them. But the majority of people like Maria are coming to file for asylum, which Maria can do. But she has another option that she likely didn't know, which is the Violence Against Women's Act. The whole point of Violence Against Women's Act is that no one should have to stay in an abusive relationship only to achieve legal status. Now, she's coming because of the bad situation that she had, and it's horrific. Domestic violence is unfortunately way too common in Latin American culture. I know, I'm from Chile. My mother is from Chile. My father is from Argentina. I'm not saying that there wasn't any domestic violence in our life ever, but for whatever reason, there's a larger percentage of that in Latin American culture than there is in American culture. That isn't to say that there isn't any in the US. Just look at our family courts. There's hundreds of cases of domestic violence in every single courtroom around the country. So this is a problem that happens everywhere. The question is, what relief do they have in their countries? And when you have a situation where you can't go to the police, you can't go to the courts, your family maybe will not support you or protect you because you're property of your spouse, where are you going to go? To another country, maybe that speaks your language, that has the same problems? Or are you going to go somewhere where others have told you is welcoming to these types of problems and you might have a better life? So Maria's story, I have heard and seen thousands of times. Hers is unique. VAWA now gives her an opportunity that a year ago she didn't have. Because a year ago, VAWA, if you suffered domestic violence from your, in this case, U.S. citizen spouse, that abuse had to have been in the U.S. They had to have lived in the U.S. together in order to be a beneficiary of VAWA. Not anymore. That's not the case. So she didn't know it. First of all, both of her kids are U.S. citizens, right? So her son Mario does not need asylum. He's a U.S. citizen. And if the officer is aware they will look at it and say, wait a minute, you're married to a U.S. citizen? You have something other people don't. Now, Customs and Borders officers or ICE officers are not trained attorneys. This is not a scenario they see on a regular basis. So they may not even be aware that that's an option. But they will definitely look and say, wait, this is a little different. Your kids have a U.S. passport. How is it that you don't? Oh, your spouse is. Huh. She's more likely to be admitted, and she's more likely to be given the opportunity to fight her case. Now, where we are today, still under COVID rules, Title 42 still exists, which means the majority of immigrants that are presenting themselves at the border are being automatically rejected and denied under COVID rules. Now, there have been litigation, so unaccompanied women or children are given the opportunity to present their case, whereas a single man might not be, even if he's married. So she has that opportunity, and on top of it, if they recognize the VAWA component, makes her case more compelling and more likely to be admitted and given her day in court, even if she would have otherwise been rejected because of Title 42.
And I think that's really interesting how you basically unpack that. Look, a lot of times people think that they qualify for one thing or they were told, and we look at the nuances of the law and you say, hey, actually, it looks like it's going to be a better type of this case. And that makes sense.
One of the most common comments I get when I meet with first-time prospects is, oh, I've met with a lot of attorneys. Why isn't no one ever told me that before?
Yeah.
When I say, hey, you have VAWA, for example, I'm using VAWA as an example, but maybe it's a U visa, maybe it's special immigrant juvenile. Like, you're the fourth or fifth or sixth attorney I've met with. Why is it no one told me that I had this option? In other words, are you telling me the truth?
Yeah, they don't believe you.
That's like, it's almost too good to be true. And I don't have a good answer for them. All I can say is we look at it holistically.
Okay.
We follow what I call the 953 method because I made it up, so I got to name it. There are 9 principal paths to legal status. VAWA is one, asylum is another. Then we look at, okay, now that you have a path, what in your past might disqualify you? Maria's never been here before. She has no criminal record, so there's nothing that disqualifies her. But what happens if she had filed for a visa and maybe she filed incorrectly? Maybe she lied. Maybe she said she was single when she was married or married when she was not. That could affect her. Maybe she had a prior application for something. Maybe she was here previously and was deported. So whatever we have to look at, is there a path? Then is there something in her past that could disqualify her? There are 5 principal things. And if she has one of those 5, there are one of 3 ways that we can fix it. We don't accept any client that we can't answer all of those. So in Maria's situation, she has a path, she has 2, VAWA and asylum. Both of those will result in a green card. Nothing to disqualify her, so she has a good path forward. What are we talking about when we say VAWA? VAWA is similar to a family-based application. I call it a step cousin, or step sibling, I guess is more appropriate. Family-based application, we're saying, hey, the U.S. citizen is your parent, spouse, or child filing for the immigrant. And we need to prove that they're a U.S. citizen. We need to prove that relationship is legitimate. Particularly in a marriage context, immigration always assumes that it's a fraudulent marriage. And the onus is on us to show that's not the case. Now, there's 2 children born of the marriage, so proving that it was a legitimate relationship, not overly difficult here. But we also have to show that she's a good moral person, and VAWA adds extreme cruelty. So domestic violence is a really good example of that. But how do you prove domestic violence when you don't have a police report? When you're running away from your country, you don't usually stop to get medical reports, to get photographs, to get other evidence to show how you were treated. Now, we know Maria took photos of that awful beating that she had. So she actually has evidence that others might not. So she has a really solid VAWA. How does that differ for asylum? Asylum needs to prove that she fears persecution in her home country, meaning there's no place in her country where bad things won't happen to her. Why does she go to another town? Well, her husband can find her. He has resources. He has means. He travals all over the place. Okay, afraid of who? The government or a group the government can't control? Here it's more of society and how society treats women as property. And three, why? It has to be for a protected reason. Race, religion, nationality, political opinion, particular social group. And that's in the context of a trial. So it's really difficult to show why bad things are going to be happening. Okay, so I suffered abuse. I was treated poorly. Why was I treated poorly? If I walk out of my street and I get mugged, that could happen in any city, any state in the country. Why should the U.S. treat you differently and give you protection in the U.S. than anybody else? So asylum is harder to prove because the nexus of the fear, the past persecution, and the reason why it happened. In VAWA, the challenge here is going to be, how do I prove he's a U.S. citizen? I mean, did she take a copy of his birth certificate showing that he was born in the United States, or his passport, or maybe marriage license, which in some countries it shows the husband and where he was born? Those are all ways that we've used to prove that someone is a citizen. It's kind of ridiculous, right? I'm applying to USCIS, and I have to prove that he's a U.S. citizen? You mean you government don't know? Here's his social, look him up. Why do I have to do that? Unfortunately, that is one of the things that we have to do.
When it comes to Maria, I want to jump into first person here. So, when Maria finally gets to New York, are they going to welcome her with open arms? How will she be received? And what's likely the process that she'll have to go through?
Nothing quite so grandiose, unfortunately. I mean, what are we talking about here? She was interviewed by Customs and Border Patrol. She was released, probably put into removal or paroled, one of those two. If she was paroled, she can file for employment authorization immediately. But there aren't that many people that do that. Given her husband was a U.S. citizen and she has 2 U.S. citizen children, maybe she will be. But most don't get that opportunity. Most can't file for employment authorization. So they put her on a bus and she's on her own. Now, where is she going to go and how is she going to get there? That's on her. She doesn't speak the language. That's not even talking about if she gets put on a bus by Governor Abbott from Texas or Governor DeSantis from Florida on a plane and just sent somewhere, told one thing and then find reality is totally very different. So maybe there might be an agency waiting, but more often than not, there's no one waiting. And she gets there and she has to figure out how she's going to go to the next place. So she's going to have to call her aunt and make arrangements to, now, aunt's in New Jersey, she's in New York, probably in Port Authority, not that big a deal. But imagine her aunt was in California and she's now in New York. How does she get there? So that falls on the family, that falls on her, unfortunately. I wish that was not the case, but that is our reality.
It makes me wonder, I mean, will immigration officials in New York at least allow her to contact her aunt? Like, will she be able to stay with her aunt eventually? How does that work exactly?
So if somebody is a minor, they're treated through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So the process is, if she's underage, which she isn't, but if she was underage, within 72 hours, she gets transferred from CBP to Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is part of Health and Human Services. Now, they either place her with an agency or a foster parent, or most likely an agency, or they find a relative or someone that's willing to take responsibility, in which case they touch base with that individual. They make sure that they're not a criminal. They don't have, whether they're documented or not is not really a criteria. Were they placing a child in a dangerous environment? So a person's going to have to show up, maybe get fingerprinted. So there is some risk if they're undocumented. That's why ideally it should be someone who's a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. However, Maria's context, she's an adult. That's not going to happen. She gets released. She's on her own. And she's going to be told, hey, give us her address. We're going to mail you a court notice when you have to appear. And you need to appear. Also, you're going to have a date and time when you're going to present yourself to ICE. And you're going to have to comply with whatever requirements that they provide. Maybe it's give you an ankle monitoring. Maybe it's give you a phone. Do you check in? They make the decision under what conditions they're going to allow you to be released. Generally, mom with her child, probably not an ankle monitor, or if so, for a very short period of time. We're seeing more phones and check-ins.
We talked about, I believe, Title 42. Am I correct to say that, 42?
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about Title 42, and we talked about the fact that there seems to be some like a nebulous cloud over how they're handling immigrants right now with the busing and the conflict from a state by state basis. How's that playing right now when it comes to deportation? What are the chances she'll be deported right away or held in a detention center for a long period of time?
Well, given her situation, she should not be detained for a long period of time. Mom with children, they can't separate the children, can't put a child into detention.
No.
So she likely won't be held for very long. But let's say she was on her own. Well, and let's say she had an order of removal, or she had prior denied entries, or she has crimes. Maybe her abusive spouse made her do certain things. That makes it very difficult. And under those circumstances, she might very well be detained until her case is resolved. Because she has VAWA and asylum, the issue is going to be how she's going to prove it when she's detained. That's hard. She's not going to have her phone on her. She might not have those photos. What documents does she have? Who's going to help her without an attorney? It becomes very difficult for her to prove her case. She can't just show up to a judge and say, Your Honor, my husband's a U.S. citizen and I'm a victim of abuse and I want to file for VAWA. She won't even know what VAWA is. So getting the right help at the right time is incredibly important.
Yeah.
But Maria will get through that relatively easily. Today, I can't tell you that will be the case in a year or 2 years or 3 years. Under this administration, she will be released relatively quickly. Does that mean a week? Does that mean 2 weeks? It really depends on the detention center, on how long it takes to process her. Given the large number of people that are coming at the border, they're inundated. So things are taking longer than it should be. Conditions are not great. She's not being put in a Ritz-Carlton. I've been to some of those detention centers. I've been to some of those jails. They're not pleasant places to visit, let alone to be in.
So you mentioned that her husband was a U.S. citizen.
Yes.
So it makes me wonder about VAWA. I mean, if her husband wasn't a U.S. citizen, would she still have a shot?
Well, she'd be filing for an asylum claim.
Okay.
And so her case would not be as strong, but we just won one of those last week, a case based on domestic violence. Family came in February, had their trial end of August, September. End of September, and won. Now, they have 2 children still in Guatemala, their home country. So now those kids will go through a process called follow to join, where recognizing that they won asylum, the children have to be processed. So it's another application. They have to be taken to the embassy. So someone needs to do that, and then to be brought to the United States. That becomes challenging. How do you do that? That's not easy. That's going to be, the kids are with someone, so that someone is going to have to help. Usually it's the grandparents.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I don't know about you, but I feel like every day on the news I'm seeing something about people being bussed every which way, and now they're talking about when they get to their destination, whether it be Chicago or somewhere else, they're getting bussed yet again. And so, it really makes me wonder, what happens next? So once they get there, let's say after all of this, they find home, they find their family, and they get with them. What could they do next? What's the next step?
Well, they're going to have to find a way to support themselves. So first is, where am I going to live, right? Then how am I going to support myself? Now, if she was paroled, she can get employment authorization, but the majority of people are not, which means they don't have work authorization. Now, when you file for asylum, it used to be 150 days later, you can file for work authorization, and the government had 30 days to adjudicate it, meaning within 6 months of filing an application, you should have work authorization. Under Trump, they made it a year, and they wanted to get rid of the 30 days requirement to adjudicate. There's been litigation. Now it seems like it's going to go back to 150 days. That will happen soon, but it hasn't happened yet. But still, you arrived, you're in New York, day one, what do? Well, you need to find a place to stay. Church, friends, family, someone. You need to find a job. Well, how do I do that? I don't have a social. I don't have employment authorization. It means, unfortunately, you're going to take a cash-paying job. You're going to be doing something you might not want to do. I met with a client. She's a dentist in her country. She's cleaning homes now. So this affects everyone in every walk of life. I've met attorneys. I've met doctors. I've met engineers that because of political circumstances, now they were out of Venezuela. We hear what's going on in Venezuela, but it's not limited to that, where we're not just talking about someone that came to the United States because of better job opportunities. We're talking about people, high class, had an excellent way of life, and all of a sudden their life blew up for reasons out of their control. And they're having to start over. Now, if they're younger, that's easier. If they're older, that's hard. There is no game plan, but they have to figure out where they're going to live. And they have to figure out where they support themselves. And then they have to find an attorney. And depending on how quick their court is, they might need to get an attorney first. But the problem is, how do you get an attorney when you don't have $2 to your name and you don't know where you're going to live? Yeah. Again, it's not easy. And some people have it harder. If they have friends or family that can at least give them a place to stay and explain the lay of the land, then they're going to find a job quicker, they're going to find a place to live quicker, and they're going to be in a better position to help themselves. But not everyone is so fortunate. Sometimes they go on a friend of a friend. Maybe that friend of a friend isn't the best person, maybe tries to take advantage of them, make a bad situation worse. It's difficult. Going from one country to another is difficult. Leaving everything you've had is difficult. I know. I lived twice in Chile, twice in Israel, twice in the US. I've been there without $2 to your name, not knowing where you're going to do or what you're going to do or where you're going to live or how you're going to work and not even speaking the language. I've been there. It's not easy. There's no shortcuts. If you're, think about it. How bad does your life need to be in your home country to willingly put yourself in this situation? People think, oh, they're all criminals, or they're just coming here to take our jobs. They're coming here because they may not have a life if they stay. And anything they put up with here is better than that, because at least there's a chance they'll survive. Yeah, that's how bad it is. And that's the unfortunate reality.
I think that here in the United States, there is a bit of a bubble where we take things for granted, basic amenities and human rights that people just aren't getting around the world. And it really makes me wonder, too, now that you mentioned about how they support themselves. I mean, are there any government programs for someone in her situation?
Generally, no. Now, if you're filing for VAWA, you can get government assistance right away, but you got to file. If you're filing for a green card based on a family-based application, you don't get that benefit. So in a VAWA scenario, she's going to get work authorization. She's going to be entitled to public assistance immediately. Now, again, her situation, her son is a U.S. citizen. Her son will get government assistance right away. WIC, food stamps, you name it, like any other American would be entitled to. The moment she files for VAWA, she will also be entitled to those benefits. Not true for asylum.
And then on the children part, right? So Mario, I mean, he's a little bit young for school, but I mean, if he was school-aged, I mean, could he attend school and those basic amenities?
There are elements in our society that are trying to change that. But there's a Supreme Court decision that says you can't discriminate against immigrants. So if an immigrant wants to go to school, now some schools give you difficulty in saying, hey, you got to prove that Andres is Andres. How can I prove I am who I am if I had a passport, but the government took it away? I had a birth certificate, but the government took it away. So proving who you are sometimes can get complicated. But there's solutions to that. And yes, Mario's 2. No, Luca's 2. Mario's about 6 months old. He's not going to school anytime soon. But if he was of age, he'd be entitled to the same public school system that my kids would be.
That's a relief. A lot of people, when they come, I mean, it's their children and the future of their children that they're really after. I mean, and being able to at least get them into the program, that must give them a sense of relief. Assuming she's been released and possibly given a court date, what should she do now at that point?
Well, she's going to have to go to court, but she shouldn't go to court without an attorney.
Okay.
Right. So she need, again, find a place to stay, find a job, and then find counsel to figure out. I wish to say it wouldn't be in that order, but I've met with people that are in the country 2 weeks. Usually they're staying at a friend's house and a friend puts them in touch with us or a family relative, but they're not in a position to hire us. They're just saying, well, what do I do? And we guide them and we tell them what they need to do, but they're going to have to go to court and they're going to have to start setting up a new life here.
Now, I guess the big question, right, is, tell me what she shouldn't do, right? I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it seems like the government's just trying to find ways to kind of catch you up here, and that's my interpretation.
Well, I mean, she shouldn't commit any crimes, right? She shouldn't break the law. No different than any place else. That's really what it amounts to. Don't commit fraud. Look, I've met many of people that, unfortunately, because of their circumstances, they go and they steal a jar of milk or something, or diapers for their kids. And now that $5 item becomes a $4,000 legal bill, a $1,000 fee for the court, and maybe I'm exaggerating. It wouldn't happen on an $8 item, but you get my point. All of a sudden, the necessity of the moment, solving a short-term problem becomes a long-term problem, because if they're convicted, now it negatively affects the chance to get asylum or vawa. Now they're not good moral people, and maybe government will deny their case because of a poor decision made in the moment, because your child is crying and you don't have any money, and you do what you need to do.
Wow, that was a lot of great information. It sounds like Maria will have some tough times at first, but it also sounds like there are some permanent solutions available to her as well. Next time on Welcome to America, we're going to take a deeper dive into VAWA and touch on asylum claims and options for Maria's daughter, Lupe, she's the one with cerebral palsy back in Guatemala. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's show dedicated to solving these immigration problems and more. If you have your own immigration problem and would like to tell us about it in the comment section, we may feature your story in future episodes. Stay tuned and welcome to America. See you soon.
Thank you.